I created GL Gizmos because I was getting pretty annoyed at Unity's default gizmo system for two main reasons. One is that Unity gizmos, they only run in the editor, not in the exported build of your game. And, sometimes I do want to see the debugging gizmos that I've drawn while I'm testing the actual build of my game. And the other thing is that I felt like Unity gizmos was kind of lacking in the basic 2D shapes that would be pretty useful for visual debugging. So on the screen right now, this is GL Gizmos, my package, and this is just a bunch of sample shapes of things you can draw with it. So you can see there are Bezier curves, cylinders, triangles, polygons, arcs, dashed lines. On the side here are colliders, and you can't really draw all these things with Unity Gizmos. If I press the spacebar, this is pretty much everything I could draw with Unity Gizmos. Some circles, squares, and lines. If I go to the build of the game, here is again GL Gizmos, my package, running and rendering in the build. If I press the spacebar, it's completely empty because Unity Gizmos doesn't run in the editor. So after I created this script, I just found it was very useful. So I was like, hey, I should create an asset store asset. I've never done that before. So I thought it'd be pretty cool to do that. So I'm just going to show how to actually use and set up GL Gizmos in your own project. To get GL Gizmos to render in your scene, it's very simple. You just need to put the GL Gizmos component script, attach it to your main camera, and that's it. It has to be to your main camera, but once that's added, all your gizmos will be rendered the same way. And we can create a test script, kind of show the differences between GL Gizmos and Unity Gizmos. Here's our script. The onDrawGizmos function, that's the editor-only function, where typically all your Unity gizmos would have to be written there. And that's why it only runs in the editor. I'm going to write all the GL gizmos in update. And you can actually write GL gizmos anywhere you want in the script. So let's also make sure that we're using GL gizmos. And okay, for the example, let's start with Unity gizmos. Typically, you'd start by setting a color for your gizmo. And then let's draw a square. So a wire cube. And let's give it a position and a size. So for GL Gizmos, it's written pretty similarly. For the color, it's just going to be set color, and we're going to make it red again. And then for the square, it's a draw open box instead of a solid box. And then the size is going to be exactly the same, just on the opposite side of the screen. So let's open the scene. Maybe wait like 100 years for everything to load. And there it is. They look exactly the same. On the right side is Unity Gizmos, and on the left side is GL Gizmos. They look exactly the same, but GL Gizmos, it renders in the build of your game. And also, there are also a lot more shapes you can do with GL Gizmos. Let's first do one more example of something both systems can draw. Let's draw a circle. So for Unity Gizmos, that would be draw sphere, because Unity Gizmos is 3D, but since we're in a 2D environment, it's gonna show up as a circle. Give the position, and let's give it a radius of 3. And let's make the color cyan. For GL Gizmos, it's going to be draw solid circle. And once again, it's going to be just on the opposite side of the screen, but all the parameters are pretty much the same. So let's open the scene. There on the right side, that's Unity Gizmos, and you see the sphere is kind of like, it's weirdly shaded because it is a 3D sphere. On the left side is GL Gizmos, and it's just a nice flat circle. Very simple. I find it looks a lot better like that. So yeah, that's the circle example. One thing you might have noticed is that Unity Gizmos, it has this thing where it can show up in the editor while the game is not actually running, which it's pretty useful. If you want to do that in GL Gizmos, you can simply just make your script execute in edit mode, and in the GL Gizmo script, uncomment out this and also make it execute in edit mode, and you'll have it running while the game is not actually running. So let's do one example now of something you can do in GL Gizmos that doesn't really work with Unity Gizmos. You have this player, for example, and he has a box collider. And I like to always draw gizmos around the player's colliders and stuff. You could draw a square with Unity Gizmos, but if you give it an edge radius with these rounded corners, now you can't really do that. And I found that to be like a real problem while I was working on that. So with GL Gizmos, it's very simple to get this collider drawn. First, let's get a reference to that collider in the script. And then in GL Gizmos, it's just draw collider. Put in the collider. Let's make the color yellow. Pass the reference to the collider there. There it is. The collider is nicely drawn with its edge radius. I just like this a lot. So that's just one of many other shapes you can create with GL Gizmos. I showed before in the demo scene all of these shapes that you can create, polygons, triangles. These are other colliders. And look, there's a lot of things for you to look at. There's also, I include this documentation that just has all the different shapes you can create. Much more than like the, I think like 5 that Unity Gizmos has. So also it's very useful for my own projects. So for example, this is a project I'm working on right now. I use GL Gizmos for basically all the gizmos. So the path of the player is this green path. Every jump I just draw a square. The triangles on the orbs are drawn GL Gizmos. These like debug lines are all GL Gizmos, and it's just very useful. See, I have a Bezier curve showing like the path between the purple orb and the target. At one point, I was going to make a video about this game, and instead of creating like having to edit a bunch of things, I said, hey, I could just use GL Gizmos, and I can like draw paths with it and squares to show what I'm talking about. So these are all the different things you can create with GL Gizmos, and I've used it in replacement of like simple sprites. So for like this project I made a while ago, all these circles are just gizmos instead of using a bunch of circle sprites. And all of these, if this was all sprites, it could start lagging, but it's just a bunch of gizmos. So these are just the things I've used GL Gizmos for my own project. There's a lot of shapes for you to use, so I'm just going to end the showcase there, and I hope it's pretty useful for you.